Well, good morning. It's August 24th, and what a day of revelation. Okay, first of all, I can see the Rockies, so I can see the snow caps. So that means like the weather is getting a little better. But as the bannock burns, oh my goodness, when you think you have life figured out to some degree, and then you get hit with a revelation that it's not what it seems to be. So I was talking to my brother, and we're having a conversation because it had to do with some dispute over who said what and why, and then he says to me, "Do you know that he might not be our brother?" And I'm going, "What?" And he says, "Well, back in the day, things weren't the way it was." He says, and in my community, like I said, a collective and holistic approach is when you live in a community where people, you know them since childhood until they become seniors, and a lot of misogyny or lateral violence, especially when it comes to Indigenous women, I think it stems from the fact that in terms of understanding healthy human sexuality, or even having discussions with your partner about intimacy, leads to a lot of confusion later, because sometimes, like I said, my late mother, bless her heart, thought, she did disclose to me she thought she was going to have a litter of puppies, and because again, she was raised in Indian residential school, and they didn't teach anything about sexuality. And a lot of times in our communities, I think it's the whole understanding the genocide trauma, because the reality of it too is, like, I've grown up with some of these, like, I've grown up with people, and then I find out that they have found out that their father isn't really their father, and a lot of the protocols in, say, owning a teepee or handing down rituals and ceremonies get that the transfer doesn't happen because the person isn't biologically the person of the individual who holds that bundle or that teepee, and so here when we have disputes over who's going to put their house where, and then you have the other brother arguing, and then you're going, what the heck? And the fact that my siblings have been discussing the fact that this one brother might not even be her brother. Oh my goodness. Like, I really have to laugh because understand this brother is Mormon, and I have a Mormon sister as well. So they were all converted. And I'm talking to my younger brother. He's anyway, and I have a younger sister too. Okay, so we're like he says, there are just some things now that we're older that, accepting our siblings the way they think. I said, yes. I said, that's the reason I won't talk to the brother and sister who are Mormon. Because when I lived in Utah and I struggled, I was like in the caste system, I was the lowest of the low. And because my one sister can pass for a white woman, she was like near to heaven and God, okay? Because again, in Mormon thinking, a single woman cannot go into heaven unless she's married to a returned missionary or someone who's gone into the Mormon temple and then they get sealed. So if you're born in the coven, that means if you've married a woman in the temple and your children have all been married because you consummated your marriage and was sealed to a woman, then all your children from that time on are born in the coven. So they're raised in the church, and then by the time they're 8, the father baptizes them. Okay, but at the same time too, there's such a thing like at Brigham Young University where they called it the Mrs. degree. So a single woman, the only way to her salvation is to marry a Mormon man in the temple and raise children in the covenant. And if you aren't able to do that, like you're destined to burn in hell, because some women, like when I talk about a cult, the fact that you can be a woman and my God, you're taking all the coercive control over the priesthood, and the guy is like having affairs with other women, having children, and you have to stick with this piece of shit. Understand this too. My sister, again, like I said, she can pass for white. She again, in Mormonism too, they don't condone homosexuality, and so for the life of me, because I've never been married and I didn't date a Mormon man. And again, when I talk about matriarchy, and I'm trying to even talk to my sister about matriarchy and like the oxytocin and the hormones of women, we tend to feel comfortable more around other women. It's just in our biology, just like as men need dopamine and masturbation. And I mean, sexual activity is important. The reality is that the Mormon Church tries to put restrictions on that. The natural order of the human body, they try to control. So what am I getting at? Okay, my brother married in the temple. All his children were raised in the covenant. But in terms of mental health, for both my siblings who are Mormon, I like I said, my sister, for the life of me, thinks that I'm gay, and for the life of me, my brother, who's Mormon, just thinks I'm going to burn in hell because I'm a single woman. So this whole tenaciousness, or this whole false premise that you got to get single women married, or like, what the hell? She's nothing if she's not attached to some male. You understand, like, this is cult mentality. So, like, I refuse to talk to them because it's like talking to, it's like, it's talking to empty space. There's no energy there. And so when I talk to my younger siblings, I just say, you talk to them. You deal with them. I'm at the age where I'm just looking after myself. And my younger brother, he says, I'm just concerned about my children and myself. And I said, yes. I said, but the arguments that these two try to create, as if they have some sort of privilege. Again, if belonging to a religion makes your skin white and delightsome, then there is something the matter. Like when I talk about pretendians and people being ashamed and not having a backbone to be proud of being Indigenous. Example A and B, my brother and sister. So yes, I do have room to talk about, things that have to pertain to how people identify with who they are. I don't want to go into the details of the conflict that I've just experienced with them this morning, even though I haven't talked with them. It's just the notion that I have my siblings that are going to be dealing with the aftermath of what they've created with the leadership here in my community. So this one thing that I wanted to read is Understanding Genocide and Trauma. And one of the ladies that I follow, she's a lawyer, a Sioux woman. She's a lawyer, and her husband had served in Vietnam, and he had killed 38 Vietnamese. Came back from the war, and he had a difficult time adjusting. He ended up in a psych ward and did some prison time. And he'd already been traumatized as a child in Indian residential schools. But it's how he recovered and how he talked about death and dying. And he made a comment to me. He said, when you speak ill of somebody, he says, that's how easy it is to kill a human being. And it makes you think, like that we so commonly say things. Like this morning, I was when I was talking to my siblings, I was using profanity. Like that's how angry I got over this crisis. Anyway, this Vietnam vet, he passed away. But when we talk about missions in life, he used to have a dream, and it bothered him about the fact that he had killed these men, and so there were 38 Sioux men that were hung in the largest mass execution in Mankato history, Mankato, Minnesota, because of President Lincoln. And so he created a ride every year for the Sioux people to make a trek back to Mankato, Minnesota, to honor the 38 Sioux that were hung in one gallows at one time. And again, to even when you talk about the last Sundance, where they honored the horse because they were being chased away from Minnesota because there was a bounty created on scalps for Indigenous people, like the Sioux people. That's why I say there was a town in South Dakota that was just created for settlers who hunted Indigenous people, especially Sioux women who were pregnant. They would kill them, gut them, and take the baby's scalp and the woman's scalp. So a lot of this stuff on genocide, it has some meaning because it proliferates or percolates from hundreds of years ago to present, and how we as an Indigenous people see ourselves. And for me as an Indigenous woman, it's important because there's so many murdered and missing Indigenous women, and even children that are still being taken away from, the very breasts of their mothers as they're nursing. I mean, that one lady, it just breaks my heart. She gave birth. She couldn't even hold her baby, and they just took him. And within a month, she died from a broken heart. So anyway, this lady, this lawyer whose husband had passed away, his husband was the Vietnam vet, she's making a comment about this. It's called Indigenous Psychological Services, Understanding Genocide Trauma. And she says, just look at the level of violence on our homelands. The collective pain is deep, and we need a massive overhaul of the behavioral science system in our reservations. And when I say that, it's not only the reservations in the United States, but the reserves in Canada. There are two different ways of calling these homelands. In the States, they're called reservations, and in Canada, they're called reserves. Now, in this article, it says, genocide trauma is different from a single traumatic event. It occurs when communities experience widespread intentional harm aimed at destroying a people, their culture, language, identity, and ways of life. The impacts can be extended across generations, affecting individuals, families, and entire communities long the original events have occurred. Long after the original events have occurred. So when I talk about the hanging at Mankato, that's an example. Unlike trauma that may result from one incident, genocide trauma is often chronic and cumulative. It can influence how people experience safety, trust, relationships, identity, and connection with culture and community. These effects may be passed through family systems, community experiences, and ongoing social and structural challenges, contributing to what is often referred to as intergenerational trauma. Healing from generational trauma requires more than addressing individual symptoms. That's why when I mention my brother and sister, it's different. It's more than just addressing my brother and sister. Okay, it involves restoring cultural connections, strengthening community relationships, reclaiming language and tradition, and creating space for safety, dignity, and belonging. That's why I think sometimes we become so vulnerable when we have someone who comes in as a spiritual person and they bastardize everything because we're so susceptible. We're ripe for the picking. And again, too, for any apostatizing, missionary work, conversion therapies and shit like that, because, we're so vulnerable to people, for cult leaders, any cult. Understanding the complexities of genocide trauma is an important step towards healing, resilience, and wellness for future generation. Let's take a stand together and start talking. We cannot be silenced. Generational trauma is different than any other trauma. And I'm glad I came across this because it is true. Everything I talk about in terms of even the lateral violence when it comes to being Indigenous. So the topic was, like, I'm 74. I have my house. This house was given to me by my mother. When I was in my late teens, I ran away to Vancouver And again, I was sexually assaulted at 19 by serial rapists who were in my community. Now, the reflection of like, oh my goodness, my brother might not be my brother. Like, it's just the reality of how people saw sexual activity or raising families. But I'm not trying to take away the fact that sexual assault is like, there's no place in the sense of it being normalized. But in some cases, because of rape culture, it is seen that way. And unless you actually talk about it and dismantle it, or even talk about what is restorative justice, then we're basically leaving it up to somebody to interpret it for us. And that's what I say, we're more vulnerable. And so, for example, like I said, I was going to high school. I went back to high school in my late teens, and because there was no money to go to education, I had to go through the public system. And I did write the first proposal for the first daycare center through provincial funding. And then by the time I was 24, I helped my late mother do a proposal for a detox treatment center. And again, the money came in from the federal government. So as these things are happening, like I'm trying to find a place to stay in my community. So that's why I created these help to get these grants. So there would be houses that the daycare and the detox treatment center would house, but they needed janitors. And so each time I did this was writing a request to the chief and council if I could stay in these homes where I could be the janitor and look after the building. I wasn't asking for a job in management or any staff in the daycare or the treatment center. I was just wanted a place to live and take care of, and one part of the place to be mine. But they said no, and they created a policy that any Indigenous woman, 55 years and younger, who had no dependents, could not apply for a house until after she was 55. Now, I don't know when that changed. It could have been 10 years ago. It could have been 15. I don't know, but it's something that's burned in the etches of my mind, because even the house I'm living in was gifted to me by my late mother, and I took care of her for over 10 years. Again, too, a lot of times, a lot of the seniors who were sick, like my mother, they were getting home care, like huge amounts of money to take care of their families, but I was given nothing. It wasn't until 6 months before my mother passed away that they started giving me money, because I had to give her catheters every day. And so anything that I've tried to get in terms of just a place to stay has been really difficult. And one of my cousins says, "I've known you for 20 years. You haven't had a job." Like, I was director of education at Supremacy, and like I said, when leadership tried to groom me to transfer me out of my manager's job to another manager's job, I refused, because I knew what nepotism was, and I wasn't about to be groomed by someone who I wasn't even related to, but was a chief, and he's around my age. I mean, like, when I say I'm single, I've never been in a relationship, never had children. I've rejected quite a lot of men. Okay, so it's not like this isn't my first rodeo type of thing. So, when I'm approached that I'm going to get this job, I said no. I'd sooner settle out of court and get paid that way. And from that time on, I was just sort of shunned and wasn't allowed to be in management, because as long as that head chief was the one who I rejected, then, like, because I refused to obey him. And it's the same thing too, even within families, like, or even within social structures. And again, a lot of the lateral violence, even when I would warn people about Nathan Chasing Horse, and they just found that I wasn't credible. Again, too, that's, again, part of lateral violence, because, like I said, I took, there were serial rapists, two of them. The one died at 29, and the other one, he's still alive, but he served time. I took him to court, he served time. but it's the women they married, their children, and their siblings and relatives who shunned me. And so even when my Mormon brother and sister shunned me, that's okay. I've been shunned most of my life because I'm female and I chose to be single. Like I said, my sister thinks I'm gay because I don't have children. Mind you, again, even when people accuse me of chasing Nathan chasing horse, again, where is my trap line? If I was of such sexual orientation, I would have had many female lovers, or I would have had many male lovers. So when I say I haven't been sexually active in 50 years, the proof is in the pudding. And the reality of it is because I lived in a closed community living in a small town, it's a little different than living in a small town, because in a small town you can leave and move. But in a Indigenous community, Métis, Inuit, or First Nations, you live here, you grow up here, and you die here. So it's a harder struggle in the sense that people know you, and hopefully as you get older, there's more respect in it, and that's what I think my whole premise in doing my podcast too is, knowing that young people in my community respect me. And again, you have to respect yourself first. And like my late mother used to say, love yourself. So upon talking with my brother this morning, he said, I'd like to see a DNA test for this other brother. And I laugh because this is the first day and the first time I'm even acknowledging this, because I just never even thought that he might not be my brother. Oh, as the fry bread burns, oh my goodness. In the drama and the whole, I'm the oldest female, and so I took care of all of my siblings to help my parents out. So, I just, I'm sorry. When I talk about relationships and just my perspective and trying to understand the way young people talk, and I say if the baseline is bisexuality, and so you're coming from a point of view, okay, if the baseline is bisexuality, and people get into relationships and when women get abused, at what point where there's equality when both partners don't abuse each other? And so when we're saying the baseline is bisexuality, and the baseline is like there's a mutual understanding that you're going to be sexual with each other, the mutual understanding is that at some point in your life, we don't know how long, maybe 5, 10, 20 years, you'll outgrow each other and seek other sexual partners. That's the nature of being human. Okay, so again, for whatever reason, this whole need to talk about sexuality, especially when it comes to men having sex, heterosexual men having sex with men, doesn't make them homosexual. The whole notion of bisexuality and the notion of having a baseline so that you can put yourself in that position and saying, okay, I understand this point, because if I'm leaning this way, sure, I can see that, because you have to be open-minded about it and take into consideration these things that human beings are going through. Again, like my brother said, back in the day it was different. Like today, we have to have these conversations. We do, and the reality of it is, I was like I said, I had a white friend. I tell you, I do not trust white women. Even when I had this white friend since the pandemic, and she ghosted me, it's just the reality. And when I've talked to her and she's told me about her sexual life as a white woman and her friends, she says, I have a married couple, their birth control is abortion. like it's such a privilege. And again, I like for me, I see it that way because, like, when you're in a sexual relationship and you're not both using birth control, but you're using every time the woman gets pregnant, the spouse approves for her to go and get an abortion. I like that kind of dialogue. I'm sorry, but like I said, the baseline is bisexuality. So when I hear stories about the Grindr culture, where heterosexual men are hooking up with men at conferences to have sex with men, and then even understanding the dynamics of it, the naivete of like if you don't put yourself at a home base of bisexuality, you're looking at a heterosexual point of view of like, how do men make love with each other? See, you have to have some form of baseline to look at it and say, okay, they want to experience what it is to be submissive, because all the time in having intercourse with a woman, the woman is submissive. And again, too, how submissive to the point of, is it coercive? Because if it's coercive, then the poor woman has never really experienced an orgasm, or even have had safety, the sense of safety in having intercourse. These things might seem like, oh, that doesn't happen in modern days. No, the conversation needs to be spoken to, because like I had a female white friend, and let me put it this way: it's not that I don't trust all white women. There are some white women, bless their hearts, like Barbara. She passed away, and she'd say to me, Marina, when I counsel white women, this is a white woman saying this. She was a forensic nurse. She says, when I talk to white women, she says, I talk to them about like the first night they got married, on their that night. Some women were raped by their husbands. Some women caught sexually transmitted diseases the first time they had intercourse. Some women, that's how all they believed was rape was the natural way of making children. A lot of the submissiveness or the lack of sexual education for white women, from her point of view when she's talking to me, I thought was horrific. Especially too when I've heard stories of white women screaming in the delivery room because it was so painful. And so for me, I again, from an Indigenous perspective, I'm going, I didn't see that, because again, Indigenous women aren't talking either. Again, because who's teaching healthy human sexuality, and what is so taboo? So even talking about hypersexuality, that's still a taboo in all cultures, and talking about limerence as well, that's also taboo. Yet it's important to have these discussions, because if you're that vulnerable and that naive, and for some reason maybe you have a disability that makes you prone to this vulnerability, you do have to have the ability to talk to someone and ask questions. Because if you don't, then how free are you in your sexuality? And so that's why when people talk about freedom, what is freedom like for women and men? Because the notion of having and enjoying yourself, your body, your sexual pleasure, because this is the life you chose, that in itself is very profound, because a lot of people do not have that. For some reason they just don't, or for some reason they think they have and they really don't. Much like I thought my brother was my full brother, realizing he might not even be my father's son. Oh, as the fry bread burns, I talk about shit like that with my friends, and whenever we're like the older, I'm 74, so you got to understand, even the grandmothers who would, when we were young, they always had this saying, as the fry bread burns, or as the bannock burns, because my parents used to say, it ain't over till you're 6 feet underground. and my cousin was saying, she says, yeah, she had a younger brother who passed away, and she says he used to say everybody horny, like he was making fun of people just being sexually, wanting sex, and I said to my cousin, yes, even fruit flies are horny. So the very fact that we're sexual beings, and the fact that we feel shy or inhibited to talk about our bodies is another thing. And even too, during the sexual revolution, or even the book The Joy of Sex, or you got to understand, I didn't even know people had access to pornography until 3 years ago. Okay, 3 or 4 years ago. It was during the pandemic, and I'm going, what? And how I came across it was through, I think, TikTok or some social media where they were talking about OnlyFans. I didn't even know about that either. So here I am, a senior, getting educated about human sexuality, and I'm going, what? It just amazes me. And so that's why when I have an opportunity to talk to older women that are grandmothers, or even younger women who refuse to be in relationships, there's a hell of a lot of women in general who are just refusing to have any type of sexual partner. And again, too, as our bodies change, like I said, it's one thing to understand childhood behavior, but it's another thing to even understand yourself after the age of 50, because our bodies are not regenerating as much as they used to, and anything else just sort of is downhill. But again, too, like I said, the whole reality of what happens to men, the male body. I don't mean to sound very ignorant or naive, but I'm just one person. Imagine we live in a planet of 8 billion people, and for the life of me, how many of the 8 billion actually know about human sexuality? A lot of times when I think about things like starving children, when my parents came back from South America and India, and they saw all these starving children, and then later on I realized that they're so poor that the parents would put them up and sell them in human trafficking. And you think it's happening in India or someplace in China or in Vietnam or in South America in some slum home. It isn't. It's happening right in our own backyards, and so understanding the vulnerability, like when I say intergenerational trauma, it's made us vulnerable, and for no fault of our own. Why didn't I ever question if my brother was actually my brother? It just, it didn't even click in my mind that he couldn't be my brother. Yeah, so I'm having a hard time getting my mind around that, but it does make a hell of a lot of sense too. And the fact is, I can talk about my aunt, or claims that all of my uncle's children, he's only got one. The whole reality of, as we grow up and our genetics show that who we are related to comes out in our features. So it's amazing. And again, too, maybe this brother, the way he treats all of us is because he's figured it out, and maybe that's why he's struggling with his mental health. Anyway, on another note, when this morning I woke up and I also thought about closure. And it's been April, May, June, July, August, 5 months since the sentencing of Nathan Chasing Horse. So in March was the first time I went down to Las Vegas. And I thought about it, because now it's been 6 months, and I thought, the way things happened were meant to happen this way. I was meant to have support going down to Las Vegas. I was meant to have a man accompany me to Las Vegas to witnessing the sentencing of Nathan Chasenhorse. I don't think it would have been as profound if it was a woman that traveled with me. And it didn't really occur to me until this morning as I'm thinking about it. And because like I had a prayer ceremony with Lynette and Sierra, and the fellow that had accompanied me wanted to take pictures. And I said, no. I said, I've thought about it. And I thought, no, this Nathan represents a male harming females. If I have a male coming into this prayer circle, it's not going to have the same impact if it's just women. And again, the whole notion of like oxytocin, hormones, all that comes into play in women healing from sexual trauma. And the notion that if there was a woman there witnessing it, it would be totally different. But I had to put the boundary down, and I had to have some separation from male and female, and that it was a female. It's a female ritual and ceremony to empower other women. And even like today when I'm thinking about it, and I was thinking, no, the closure was important, because it's not just the closure of Nathan Chasenhorse. It was the reality. I spent 20 years, not like obsessed every day, but it was just the 20 years of writing on my blog, warning people. And every once in a while I'd get an email or something. And again, I didn't have a podcast, so I wasn't able to respond as quickly. But it was the whole notion that I took it upon myself to do this, and now I don't do it. Like I don't have to warn people about Nathan Chasenhorse, and the fact that I was accompanied by a man who represents a man who, because this is a crime that men created against women, and so I think the closure was that that here's a man who's representing all men, and yet all men aren't as devious as Nathan Chasenhorse. And yet at the same time, it's important for women, and again, this is why I say the company of women, it's important for women to face their fear, because in facing your fear, you get your spidey senses tingling when you see men or feel you can't trust a man. Because men, no matter what culture they're from, as women, we have to be balanced and have the ability to use our spidey senses. Because we have to, because they're dangerous. The most dangerous man a woman will ever face is her partner. And so for whatever reason, like I said, I could confront my brother, I could do all that, but what good is it going to do? He'll get angry, he may come out and punch me, like violence. What does it serve? Can't change him. Like my younger brother says, we can't change our siblings. They do have their own God. And that's the reality of it, like to be aware and understand that people think a certain way, and it's okay. It's okay for them to live a certain way, but as women, it's important for us to understand that there's good reason to fear men. And for me as an elder, a senior woman, and knowing that there are white women who are living in nursing homes who are scared of those white men in those nursing homes. And they have no choice but to live like almost captive or in prison in those places because they have no other support. So for me, when I took care of my late mother, I protected her. I didn't know that I was protecting her against, like I would protect her against my brother, the one who he had so much hatred towards her. You know, it really makes me think he had to have thought that he might not be a full that he might have a different father. But just the way he treated my mother, the demands he put on her, I couldn't comprehend it. I thought it was all religiosity. But now in hindsight, when I think about it, and I think, no, if I wasn't here, what would he have done? What would he have done to her? And, like I said, when I talked to this white woman, and she just said, growing up, I hardly ever asked any questions about sexuality. She says, I don't know a lot of things. She didn't know where a G-spot was. Even when I talk to people about vaginal estrogen and urinary tract infections and what it means for an aging woman to have these things in her body, even women who are pregnant, vaginal estrogen, these things with hormones and oxytocin, which is a totally, how would I put it? It's on the other side of the world when it comes to men and their testosterone and dopamine, whereas women, it's on the other side of the world, which is like estrogen, and because childbearing and the whole biology of women like bonding with their children because they have to help the child form an identity. It's an amazing process to be a woman and to have that type of responsibility. But then as the child grows up and starts thinking, I'm really, just talking about this and realizing, out of all my siblings, this one brother really hated our mother. And he'd say to her face, he'd say, I'm sealed to my family, I'm sealed to my wife in the Mormon temple, but I won't get sealed to you or our dad, he says. Because in the Mormon temple, in the Mormon way of thinking, the whole premise is to be sealed to your parents. And it goes down in terms of the genealogy, so you get sealed to your parents and your grandparents, etc. But this particular brother would make it a point to say to my mom that he refused to get sealed to her. Like, how vindictive, how bitter. And the reality for me is, like, he hasn't talked to me in 13 years. And the reality is that he carries that hate with him. That's why it was so upsetting what I heard today. And, the very fact that, like my family, my brother and sister are, they've just bastardized the memory of my mother. My one sister, who can pass for a white woman, growing up, and people used to say that my mother had an affair with a white man. That's why my sister looks white. They didn't realize, like, all of my 22 aunts and uncles, my 22, 26 aunts and uncles on my parents' side are Sioux, and they've been mixing with white people for over 100 years. That's part of our that's part of our biology, but because I live in Sutina, they don't know the relatives, like how many relatives that I have that are Dakota. I have Nakota as well, but it's just the pure ignorance. Again, too, Sutina has a real bias towards people who are mixed blood or are Métis, because again, like I say, the province of Alberta was established from northern Alberta to the south, and if the Métis hadn't come down into the Treaty 7 area and started marrying within the Tsuut'ina wouldn't have been able to negotiate with the other tribes of Treaty 7 to get dry meat and provisions to go take it up north to northern Alberta and feed the settlers. All this is history, and yet it has to do with genocidal, like the trauma, intergenerational trauma. A lot of times, yes, Indian residential schools, all that played into it. But again, too, you have to understand the whole nature of fancy boys and fancy girls. So the reality of it is, like, here's my sister. If we were part of this, like, and I said, like, the Indian Act, the way it was set up, was to groom children to be maids, housewives, farmhands. There was no indication that we had a brain that we had a brain or common sense. We were just treated like animals, like livestock, and we needed to be trained. So again, the darker your skin, the more animalistic you were, and the lighter the skin, the more sophisticated you were, and more desirable you were. So you became like within the black genre of slavery, you became the fancy boys or fancy girls, and so when you were sold, you were sold at a huge price. So again, this intergenerational trauma, in terms of even within my own family, where my sister would be a fancy girl because she's fair skinned, and then there's my brother who is dark skinned, but yet because they're both Mormon, and the way the Mormon Church teaches you is the more religiously obedient you are to the gospel principles, the more delightsome and white your skin becomes, and the more you practice going into the Mormon temple, the whiter your skin becomes. Like, I know when people say, like when I say I'm Mormon and they look at me, how could you be? I'm going, look at all the information I can tell you about what it is their doctrine is. I never went on a mission, never went into the temple. Like, I think the premise was know your enemies. And when I was looking after my niece, and she went to Catholic school, and she said, "Oh, Auntie," she says, "I walked down the corridor, I could just smell body odor." Because again, biology, and I'm going, oh my goodness, my poor girl's got a headache. Just the differences, and yet, like we don't, I didn't, the whole nature of aging and white people having their hair start going gray at age 30, the whole notion of trying to stay young, again, because there are other people in the world who are dark-skinned who age beautifully. Like when people see me, they don't see me as a 74-year-old. Sometimes they see me as a 55-year-old because I don't look my age. That's just biological. That has nothing, that has to do with my genes. And again, I have the opportunity to explain the differences. But yet at the same time, when I look at the cult of Mormonism, or the way society is set up, that the white supremacy, all that is part of that whole cult mentality of what is desirable, and to keep on indoctrinating people, vulnerable people, to believe this. It is still happening. I wanted to also play a recording, because just recently, too, a lot of issues have arisen from what's the whole notion of white supremacy, and how these what do they call them? They came to Alberta, and it had to do with I forget what they call them. Let's see, what did they call them now? Let's see if I can go into this and find it. No, it's not there. Darn. But even too, you look at even the Mormon Church, like how much tax money the Canadians paid that were sent to Brigham Young University. Now, if I can find this one, and then read it to you, because it has something to do with white supremacy. If I can just find it. Let's see, white nationalists. See if that comes up, because again, they have this name for it, and tracking Canada's fat. No, that's not it. Like, I don't know. It's amazing to me. Maybe if I play this, maybe, I don't know if it can even do that. No, it's not going to do that. I'm sorry that I'm taking time like this. I didn't mean to do this, but let's see here. Let's try. Okay, here's something. Maybe this is a little bit better. But it is important. Like I said, it's important that people know. Let's try. I think it was this one here. Here we go.
MMA gym owners, coaches ID.
Huh. It's not working. What do you know? Maybe if I can... I'm so sorry. Let's see if I can try this again.
Secretive neo-Nazi event in BC. Expert says event exemplifies worrying overlap between martial arts and extremism. Christian Poslang, Ivan Angelovsky, Jordan Pearson, Eric Cito, CBC News, posted, November 10, 2025, 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Some of the country's most prominent white supremacist groups gathered in Vancouver this summer for a secretive neo-Nazi conference that also included martial arts gym owners, coaches and trainers. Held at the Scottish Cultural Centre in the city's South End, the event was organized by a group called Exiles of the Golden Age and discussed the formation of manor buns. On the group's social media accounts, they described these as disciplined groups of men who can rebuild our world amidst the coming wreckage. CBC News' Visual Investigations Unit obtained video of attendees and organizers entering the event. The video was gathered by the nonprofit Canadian Anti-Hate Network, CAN, which studies far-right extremism in Canada. One conference speaker, a founding member of the white nationalist group Wolves of Vinland, talked of an ongoing war in society that is both cultural and physical. Another speaker said the manor bund formations must be based on principles that are ethnically exclusive. The gathering included individuals with long-standing ties to the neo-Nazi movement and members of white supremacist nationalist group Second Sons Canada, an example of an active club previously reported on by CBC News. Active clubs are white supremacist groups that organize combat training, often in public parks and privately owned gyms. Watch investigating a neo-Nazi conference in BC. I find it extremely alarming that there would be any extremist group or, fascist fight club, showing up in Vancouver, City Councillor Rebecca Bly told CBC. Any group whose foundational premise is violence against others based on race or ethnicity is not welcome in Vancouver. Evan Balgard, Executive Director of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, said it was significant that Exiles was able to bring together so many different individuals and groups in a unique event that was heavy on philosophy. The white nationalist movement used to be very fragmented and had a lot of infighting, Balgard said. The reason that we've been warning about the size and the threat of the white nationalist movement in Canada right now is because they have managed to sort of figure out a unified and coherent strategy. And they are successfully recruiting large numbers of people doing it. Decoding folkishness. Experts say Exiles of the Golden Age is an example of a folkish group, a philosophy that incorporates Germanic or Norse pagan traditions with white supremacist and neo-Nazi elements. The Exiles of the Golden Age name appears in a passage from The Lightning in the Sun, a 1958 book by Savitri Devi, a notorious neo-Nazi writer who espoused a cyclical view of history where humanity will once again enter a golden age after going through a period of darkness and decay. The Lightning in the Sun is dedicated to Adolf Hitler, whom Devi describes as the man against time, and the godlike individual of our times. An advertisement for another conference organized by Exiles last year invited all men against time. The group's Telegram channel also features pictures of a pagan ceremony to mark the changing of the seasons that included swastikas. If you see a swastika in the middle of a picture, at that point, that's Nazism, said Catherine Tibaldi, a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Luxembourg who specializes in modern white supremacist movements. Many symbols have multiple meanings and different interpretations, but some of them just become very regimented, very fixed. And this is one of them. In a speech at the Vancouver event, a conference organizer identified by CAN and verified by CBC as BC-based boxing coach Lane Palmer discussed Indo-European first principles. He said those principles are ethnically exclusive, both biologically and spiritually. He also said, we need an ethnic religion. Amarnatha Marasingam, an associate professor of religion at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, and an expert in extremism, said folkish groups like the Exiles see a fusion between their religious sense and their racial sense. In a statement to CBC News, Vancouver's Scottish Cultural Centre, where the event was held, said it had been told the event was a book release gathering. We do not, and would not, knowingly rent our venue to any group or individual that promotes reprehensible ideologies like hate in any form, including white supremacist organizations, said Daryl Carricker, the center's executive director. He said the center was reviewing its booking policies. The event also featured a display of books and a talk from the owner of Imperium Press, which describes itself as an illiberal and folkish press. The company publishes a number of controversial, far-right texts, including owner Mike Maxwell's The Cultured Thug, a guide to radical right-wing thought, and a book by Martin Sellner, a prominent white nationalist activist from Austria. Gym owners, trainers in attendance. In previous reporting on Second Sons and active clubs in Canada, CBC News spoke with gym owners whose facilities had been used by the groups for training. Those gym owners said they had no idea of the ideology espoused by the groups booking their spaces. Researchers have long warned about the infiltration of the martial arts community by neo-Nazi and white supremacist movements. Among the attendees at the Exiles event, Khan identified a number of gym owners, coaches and trainers who serve a diverse clientele, including children. CBC's visual investigations team used social media profiles, open source information and resources such as DarkSide and Ascent Industries, searchable databases that include information pulled from the open web and past data breaches, to corroborate the findings. Lane Palmer, who was an organizer and speaker at the event, was listed as a coach at West Shore Boxing Gym on Vancouver Island. Soon after CBC reached Palmer for comment, his profile was taken down from the gym's website. Reached via text for comment, an owner of West Shore Boxing Gym said they weren't aware of Palmer's background and that he is no longer part of the gym. Our gym promotes an inclusive and respectful environment that welcomes people of all backgrounds who respect others in our code of conduct, said co-owner Alexandra Strickland. Ron Pierce, who owns the martial arts club Foundry Combat Sports in Duncan, British Columbia, was also at the event. Pierce hung up on a CBC journalist after being asked about his attendance and didn't respond to other requests for comment. In a statement posted to its Instagram page following publication on Monday, Foundry Combat Sports said, participation in the event by any individual was personal, peaceful, and fully compliant with Canadian law. We unequivocally reject any attempt to link our facility, its ownership, or its members with hate, extremism, or unlawful conduct, the company said. In a separate statement posted Thursday, Foundry Combat Sports said it made a grave mistake by not verifying the nature of the event and that it does not support any Nazi or white supremacist beliefs. Another attendee was Carl Stornis-Bliss, co-owner of strength training company Brocker Strength Systems. He frequently trains out of Mission BJJ, a gym in Mission, British Columbia that opened in 2023, where he used to be an assistant children's coach. Stornis-Bliss, identified using his distinctive tattoos, can also be seen in Instagram photos wearing a motorcycle helmet with the Nazi SS symbol on the back, and with a tattoo on his stomach of an SS Totenkopf, Death's Head, symbol. Reached by phone, Stornis-Bliss denied attending the event. But a comparison of photos taken at the Exiles event and those from his personal training confirms it, as he appears at the EOTGA conference with matching tattoos and the same shirt seen in social media photos. Kieran Summers-Gill, the owner of Mission BJJ, said he's blown away by the revelations about Stornis-Bliss, who had told him he was attending a jiu-jitsu seminar in Vancouver. It's crazy because my gym has so many diverse backgrounds, Indians, Filipinos, it definitely wouldn't be a place for a white supremacist to hang out, said Summers-Gill, adding Stornis-Bliss hadn't been coaching kids there for more than a year. Summers-Gill said that he told Stornis-Bliss to leave the gym. Kareem Zidane, founder of Sports Politica, a media company that specializes in the relationship between politics and sports, said CBC's findings show mixed martial arts have become the common ground between all these entities. This is the real-world proof that mixed martial arts really does serve as this common denominator amongst these various groups, said Zidane. It suggests something far more sinister, that this is deeper and more widespread than we may have initially considered. After CBC News started reaching out to individuals spotted at the event, A post on the Exiles Telegram channel recommended attendees not respond to CBC's requests for comment. The group said in the post, "There is absolutely nothing wrong with attending an event like this, or with the ideas discussed there." The RCMP would not comment on the event or individual attendees to protect the integrity of our criminal investigations and preserve our ability to investigate. Safeguarding Canadians from ideologically motivated violent extremism remains a priority. "We are at war," says conference speaker. The Exiles conference featured attendees from several active clubs in Canada. At least 3 attendees wore the uniform of the recently formed Second Sons Canada, which pitches itself as a men's nationalist club and prominently features white supremacists among its leadership. Second Sons Canada is run by Jeremy Mackenzie, the founder of Diagolon, who this year filmed himself making a Hitler salute in a video shared on Telegram. "This gathering is a kind of alliance-building exercise," said Amara Zingham. The conference was also a connecting point between Canadian groups and the international movement. The event was supposed to feature in-person speeches by 2 speakers, Swedish YouTuber Marcus Fallen and the American Paul Wagoner. Fallen, who has been described as a white supremacist by the Anti-Defamation League, said in a video posted online that upon arriving in Canada, he was detained and questioned by border authorities before choosing to turn around. The Canada Border Services Agency declined to comment on specific incidents at the border due to privacy legislation. Wagoner is co-founder of the pagan group Wolves of Vinland, which has been described as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center in the U.S. He elected not to attempt to enter Canada and also spoke virtually at the conference. "Make no mistake, we are at war," Wagoner said in his speech. "And the war is physical in many ways for some of us, but it's also cultural and it's a war for the mind." Also present at the event were Robertson de Chazal and Josh Bruce, co-owners of the white supremacist clothing brand Vinland Battlewear, according to corporate documents. De Chazal's name was part of a prominent hack of neo-Nazi websites by the group Anonymous in 2012. In a photo supplied by Khan, he is pictured wearing a shirt of the group Vinland Hammerskins, a neo-Nazi organization. Many conference attendees were seen wearing Vinland Battlewear clothing. Numerous posts on the company's Telegram channel show neo-Nazi imagery, including one featuring a picture of an SS officer who worked at Auschwitz lighting a Christmas tree with the caption, "The torch still burns. The days of everlasting light will come again." De Chazal did not answer CBC's questions when reached by phone. Bruce did not respond to CBC's request for comment. Evan Balgard of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network said the Exiles Conference is more proof that white nationalism is on the rise in Canada. Whether you want to judge it by the number of supporters of the white nationalist movement, by their capacity for fundraising, or by the number of people who are signing up for their more militant groups, the white nationalist movement in Canada has never been larger. Do you have any tips on this story? Please contact 6@cbc.ca. MMA gym owners, coaches ID'd its...
Okay, so that was published by CBC, I think in 2025, and this whole thing, like in Millerville, which is just half an hour from here, with this organization having a gathering, like having their gathering in Alberta. So, this, like when I say cults and the recruitment and, playing on the most vulnerable, and you talk about like intergenerational trauma, that's why, even though I say about Indigenous people, yes, we understand intergenerational trauma, but when we're trying to hold a mirror to white people and saying, look, this is happening within your own society because of how vulnerable your own children have been, and look at what's developed from that. So again, this was like in November.
Nazi event in BC. Expert says event.
So this was in November 10th, 2025, that was posted, and now it's like August 24th, 2026. So even having those, having these white supremacists being trained by these groups. It's like Second Sons Canada. That's the group that was out here, and I like, even when they talk about, like, they're using pagan rituals and stuff like that, it's again trying to reclaim something, but it's coming with a warning, and that warning has to do with hate. And like, even when Nathan Chasing Horse, a lot of what he did in recruiting his members had to do with hate. Like, he when it came to white people, like, he just, I don't know, it was part of his recruitment and what he did that makes it sound so sophisticated, like how people run cults. So that's why when it talks about hate and taking the most vulnerable and recruiting them, it's diabolical, but yet it's what's happening. So, like I said, sometimes it's really difficult for me to talk about systemic racism and the repercussions of it, and how we have to, like, look after our, like, for me, it's understanding my nieces and nephews and how they have to maneuver in this society. Things are changing. I don't know what's going to happen with the referendum in September when Alberta is trying to separate from the rest of Canada. And yet, at the same time, too, the chiefs of Alberta are calling for an investigation into Danielle Smith for treason. And again, too, the influence from other people around the world, infiltrating social media to put, like, sort of to drive the stake harder in the most vulnerable. So everybody needs to be cautious of how susceptible we are to social media, and the fact that we need to have critical thinking skills. Like I said, sometimes it takes a while for any human being to just have this moment of clarity and freedom and saying, okay, this is what I went through. And like I said, it might not seem have any relevance, but for me, when you're dealing with things and it hits home, and then the thing is over, you need to have some sort of closure. So I'm hoping at some point there'll be some sort of closure for people who have so much hate for other people, that they'll come to terms with the fact that, it may have served a purpose, but it doesn't serve the good of the many. With that being said, I apologize if I have made it seem like I really don't care for my brother. But like I said, it's been, and I laugh again because I don't want to face the reality. Is that's the reality that my brothers and sisters have been talking about all these years, and I was left out of the loop. And again, I don't know why, but today it was like a wake up notice, like, oh my goodness, the possibility is that he could be not my full-blooded brother. And I've spent most of my life trying to understand the governance within my community, the reason why people behave a certain way, and just trying to enjoy my life without having to worry about somebody hurting somebody I love. And again, sometimes when it happens, it's hard to understand, but yet that's the way life is. The only conclusion that I have come to when it has come with an argument with my late mother was, she said, well, they have to learn the hard way. And I've said to her, no, children don't need to learn the hard way. We need to have skilled people to help the most vulnerable. And again, too, even in terms of radicalization and racializing, and even having a talk with white supremacists, and have a good conversation about what do we have in common and what are our differences. It's important because these are young people who have a whole life ahead of them, and the fact that they want to live like this for the rest of their life, that this is their mission in life. That's a hard pill to swallow, but that's the reality of what inflation, what all this cost of living has created, and it's sometimes I don't know. Like I keep on saying, it's easy to pretend. It's easy to pretend, but in pretending, you lose yourself. And in losing yourself, you make yourself vulnerable. So have the courage to learn more about other people. Have the courage to learn more about yourself. And I apologize again for bringing some personal family history into this podcast, but it is real, and as heartbreaking as it is, the fact is, yes, my mother could have had a child from other than from my father, but it's just the nature of how hard it was to grow up in poverty, and then to have, like my brother, have so much hate towards my mother. I'm grateful I took care of her. I'm grateful that I helped her. I was the oldest, so I had to take care of my brothers and sisters. I had to, because they didn't have the money for babysitters, and if the babysitters too were they couldn't look after like all of us. We were really rowdy kids, but managed, grew up, lived. And now we have grandchildren. So anyway, I know I'm making everybody depressed listening to what I'm saying, but I have no comfort. There's no comfort in me with the reality of why I have one brother and sister who treat me so horrible. But again, I'm at the stage in my life where I just don't need to be bothered by them, and the reason I'm involved in this is it has to do with a place where we're going to put my sister's house, and the whole argument that conflict about it, I thought that was over and had been settled when it hasn't been. And, like I said, I'm going to leave this up to my other siblings to deal with, because I don't need to deal with it. I've done all that I could as the older sibling to help take care of my nieces and nephews. And I still am there for my nieces and nephews and for their children as well. The moral, I think, of this podcast is the whole insight that a lot of times when we are struggling with commitment to make the world a better place, Creator sends invisible helping hands. Creator, the grandfathers and grandmothers, their will is being done even though we don't understand it or really see it. And today, like I said this morning, I just had this thought that everything was guided. For me to go down to Las Vegas in March and April and to have a white man bear witness with me and guide me and take care of me and honor me, respected me, and validated that everything that I did to honor my niece and my family, my community, I did what I could, without even thinking that anybody even understood what I was doing. To have closure with this, to have closure and know that there is a Creator, grandfathers and grandmothers that guide us. We may not feel or understand it, but we're always hoping and protecting and thinking and realizing and asking for protection, and also asking to release whatever self-defeating emotional pain we carry with us. So with that, I hope my listeners, I hope you understand you're important. Ask Creator and the grandfathers and grandmothers to protect you with protective, reflective, healing energy in whatever you're dealing with and the stress you're going through. And then at the same time, ask Creator and grandfathers and grandmothers to release all the self-defeating emotional pain that you might be carrying with you. And as hard as things may seem, we can walk forward. Because isn't that what karma's all about? It's an action. As my late father used to say, actions speak louder than words.